The collapse of intelligence is one of the most insidious tests of human civilization, not because of external enemies or natural disasters, but because of the inevitable presence of our own success. When a society reaches peak comfort, when survival is no longer a daily concern, something profound emerges: a systematic degradation of the very qualities that built that comfort in the first place. This degradation is not new. It has always been present, disguised under progress, entertainment, and the democratization of information. The truth is that idiocracy reveals what we spend our lives trying to ignore: the distance between collective wisdom and collective comfort. And it is precisely in that gap that civilizations die. We celebrate accessibility while destroying excellence. We worship relatability while abandoning truth. We mistake information for knowledge, opinion for expertise, and comfort for progress. This video is an invitation to traverse between two shores, between the elitism that preserves wisdom and the democracy that destroys it, between the comfort of ignorance and the burden of understanding. Because what you're witnessing, this celebration of stupidity, this mockery of intelligence, this systematic dismantling of standards, is not an accident. It is a pattern, and it is precisely how every great civilization prepares its own grave. Here I do not offer comfortable lies about everyone being smart in their own way. What I offer is clarity, a direct, unmasked look at why intelligence becomes society's enemy, and how this process, when understood, reveals the most terrifying truth about human nature. If you have made it this far, it is because something in you recognizes the pattern. Perhaps you are ready for the truth. The stupidity you see everywhere is not humanity's failure. It is humanity's choice. Oswald Spengler, one of the most penetrating observers of civilizational patterns, saw this decline not as an accident, but as biological inevitability. In his monumental work, The Decline of the West, Spengler revealed that every great civilization follows an identical arc, from the creative spring of culture to the sterile winter of civilization, where original thinking dies and is replaced by mechanical repetition. For Spengler, the transformation from culture to civilization is the transformation from creation to consumption, from depth to surface, from quality to quantity. A culture builds cathedrals, a civilization builds shopping malls. A culture produces philosophers, a civilization produces influencers. But here's what Spengler understood, that we refuse to accept. This decline is not external. It is internal. It is not imposed by barbarians at the gates. It is generated by the very success of the culture itself. When life becomes too easy, when survival is guaranteed, when comfort is universal, the selective pressure that created intelligence disappears. The culture that once demanded excellence now demands accessibility. The society that once rewarded depth now rewards popularity. The civilization that once elevated the exceptional now celebrates the mediocre, because mediocrity is safer, more relatable, less threatening to the masses who have inherited what they did not build. Spengler warned us that in this final phase, the civilization becomes hostile to the very intelligence that created it. The masses, now comfortable and numerous, begin to resent the complexity they cannot understand, the standards they cannot meet, the excellence that reminds them of their own limitations. This is not a moral judgment, it is a biological observation. Just as muscles atrophy without resistance, intelligence withers without challenge. And when a civilization removes all challenges, it has signed its own death warrant. But what if this pattern is not inevitable? What if there is a way to preserve intelligence even in the midst of comfort? This is where another perspective emerges, not that of biological determinism, but of conscious resistance. While Spengler shows us the cycle of decline with Germanic fatalism, José Ortega y Gasset offers us a different lens, the eternal struggle between the masses and the minorities, between quantity and quality, between the common and the excellent. In The Revolt of the Masses, Ortega reveals that every healthy society depends on a fundamental distinction between those who demand much of themselves and those who demand nothing. The first group, the natural aristocracy, creates, innovates, and pushes civilization forward. The second group, the masses, inherits, consumes, and ultimately destroys what they did not earn. For Ortega, the crisis of modernity is not that the masses exist, they have always existed. The crisis is that the masses have forgotten their place. They no longer look up to excellence, they resent it. They no longer aspire to rise, they demand that everything descend to their level. This is the revolt of the masses, not a political revolution, but a spiritual one. It is the systematic rejection of hierarchy, standards, and excellence in favor of a false equality that reduces everything to the lowest common denominator. But here's what Ortega understood that makes his vision transcendent. This revolt can be resisted. Unlike Spengler's biological fatalism, Ortega offers us agency. The aristocracy of mind, those who choose excellence regardless of social pressure, can preserve intelligence even when society abandons it. For Ortega, being excellent is not about birth or wealth. It is about choice. It is the choice to demand more of yourself when everyone else demands less. It is the choice to pursue depth when everyone else settles for surface. It is the choice to think when everyone else prefers to feel. This aristocracy of mind is not a class, it is a stance. And it is precisely this stance that can break the cycle of decline, not by stopping the masses from being masses, but by refusing to join them. Both Spengler and Ortega understood the same fundamental truth. The decline of intelligence is not imposed from outside, it is chosen from within. But where they differ is crucial. Spengler sees this choice as inevitable. Ortega sees it as resistible. This leads us to the most important question. Why do civilizations consistently choose stupidity over intelligence? What is it about human nature that makes this pattern so universal? Psychology helps us understand this pattern at the individual level, which then scales to entire civilizations. The decline of intelligence is not just a social phenomenon, it is a psychological one, rooted in fundamental human biases and needs. From the moment we are born, we are wired for social acceptance over truth. Our brains evolved not to be accurate, but to be accepted by the tribe. This worked well when survival depended on group cohesion, but it becomes catastrophic when survival is guaranteed and comfort is abundant. Modern neuroscience reveals that our brains literally prefer familiar lies to uncomfortable truths. We experience cognitive dissonance when faced with information that challenges our existing beliefs, and our natural response is not to examine our beliefs, it is to reject the information. This is compounded by what psychologists call the availability heuristic. We judge the truth of something by how easily we can remember examples of it. In an age of media saturation, the most repeated ideas feel the most true, regardless of their actual accuracy. But there's something even deeper at work: the psychological cost of intelligence. Being intelligent in a declining civilization is profoundly isolating. It requires you to see problems others cannot see, to understand complexities others refuse to acknowledge, to maintain standards others have abandoned. Intelligence becomes a burden because it separates you from the comfort of shared delusion. The intelligent person in a declining civilization is like the sober person at a party. Everything is less fun, more complicated, and ultimately more lonely. This is why civilizations actively select against intelligence once comfort is achieved. It is not a conspiracy, it is a natural psychological process. People choose comfortable lies over difficult truths, and they resent those who remind them that truth exists. The result is what we see everywhere today: the systematic elevation of the ignorant and the systematic marginalization of the knowledgeable. We celebrate those who tell it like it is, while ignoring those who actually know how it is. This psychological pattern, multiplied across millions of individuals, creates the civilizational pattern that Spengler and Ortega observed. The decline of intelligence is not an accident. It is the inevitable result of humans choosing comfort over truth, belonging over accuracy, feeling over thinking. But understanding this pattern is the first step to breaking it, and that requires a fundamental transformation in how we relate to intelligence itself. The transformation from civilizational decline to intellectual renaissance does not happen by magic. It requires a conscious choice to swim against the current of collective stupidity. The difference between joining the decline and resisting it lies in how we relate to intelligence itself. This process begins with radical acceptance, accepting that most people will choose comfort over truth, that society will reward mediocrity over excellence, that intelligence will often be lonely and thankless. This is not cynicism, it is realism. And realism is the foundation of resistance. After acceptance comes the choice. Will you be part of the aristocracy of mind, or will you join the revolt of the masses? This choice cannot be made once. It must be made daily, in every conversation, every decision, every moment when you must choose between what is easy and what is true. A fundamental practice in this process is intellectual solitude, the willingness to think independently, even when it isolates you from others. This means reading books that challenge you, seeking out ideas that disturb you, engaging with complexity even when simplicity is more comfortable. But beware, intellectual resistance is not intellectual arrogance. The goal is not to feel superior to others, but to maintain the standards that civilization needs to survive. The aristocracy of mind is not about looking down on the masses, but about refusing to join them in their descent. True intellectual resistance also requires the creation of counter-institutions, spaces where intelligence is valued, standards are maintained, and excellence is pursued. These might be formal institutions or informal networks, but they must exist as refuges from the general decline. Most importantly, this transformation requires you to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. In a declining civilization, intelligence is subversive. Truth is radical. Excellence is revolutionary. Choosing these things means choosing difficulty, isolation, and often unpopularity. But here's what those who make this choice discover. There is a profound satisfaction in maintaining standards when everyone else has abandoned them. There is a deep peace in pursuing truth when everyone else pursues comfort. There is an unshakable strength in thinking clearly when everyone else thinks poorly. Transforming from passive observer to active resistor is an act of civilizational rebellion. It is choosing to be the person who preserves what others destroy, who maintains what others abandon, who thinks when others refuse to think. But to sustain this transformation, you must understand the forces working against you, the subtle but powerful mechanisms that our modern world uses to discourage intelligence and reward stupidity. You may be highly educated, professionally successful, and intellectually curious, and still be participating in the dumbing down of civilization. In fact, this is the most dangerous form of intellectual decline, the smart people who choose to be stupid because it is easier, more profitable, or more socially acceptable. We flee from intellectual rigor all the time. We escape through entertainment disguised as news, through opinions disguised as analysis, through feelings disguised as facts. We consume information without processing it, share ideas without understanding them, and form beliefs without examining them. Every algorithm designed to show us what we want to see is an invitation to intellectual laziness. Every platform that rewards quick reactions over slow thinking is a weapon against deep understanding. Every culture that prizes relatability over accuracy is an enemy of truth. The modern world has created the perfect environment for the decline of intelligence. Maximum stimulation with minimum reflection, infinite information with zero wisdom, constant connectivity with no real communication. This decline has a cost. It exacts a high price in the form of political chaos, social fragmentation, and cultural decay. When a civilization can no longer distinguish between truth and opinion, between expertise and ignorance, between knowledge and noise, it has lost its ability to solve problems or make good decisions. The philosopher Hannah Arendt called this the ideal condition for mob rule, when the distinction between truth and falsehood disappears, when everything becomes a matter of opinion, when expertise is seen as just another perspective. We have learned to live in this intellectual chaos as if it were natural. We have normalized the idea that everyone's opinion is equally valid, that expertise is elitist, that complexity is pretentious. But it is not natural, and it is not sustainable. True intellectual freedom begins when you stop participating in this collective stupidity. When you have the courage to say, "I don't know," instead of pretending to have opinions about everything. When you choose to understand deeply rather than react quickly. When you refuse to mistake information for knowledge or noise for signal. This is the turning point. The moment you decide that you will no longer be complicit in the decline of intelligence, that you are willing to be unpopular in service of truth, that you will no longer sacrifice accuracy for acceptance. But this decision requires strength, because when you stop participating in collective stupidity, you begin to see how pervasive it really is. And what you see is often deeply disturbing. Idiocracy hurts. Yes, when it is mindless, passive, and unconscious. But when it is recognized and resisted, it transforms into something else, an opportunity for those who choose intelligence to stand out like stars in the darkness. Spengler showed you that civilizational decline follows a pattern, but patterns can be broken by those who understand them. Ortega taught you that the aristocracy of mind is not inherited but chosen. You can choose excellence regardless of what others choose. Psychology revealed that the preference for comfortable lies over difficult truths is natural but not inevitable. I have invited you, at every step, to face this reality with courage, to see the decline clearly, to understand your role in it, to choose resistance over participation. You can continue losing yourself in the comfort of shared ignorance, or you can choose to build your mind in the discipline of independent thought. You can keep accepting the lowest common denominator, or you can make intellectual excellence your personal standard. And I assure you, those who learn to think clearly in an age of confusion never accept intellectual mediocrity again. Not from the world, not from others, not from themselves. The civilizations that survive are not the ones with the most people. They are the ones with the most people willing to preserve what others would destroy. The future belongs not to the masses, but to the minorities who maintain standards when everyone else abandons them. Every great renaissance began with individuals who refused to participate in the decline around them. Every intellectual revival started with people who chose to think when thinking was unpopular. You can be part of the problem or part of the solution. You can join the revolt of the masses or the aristocracy of mind. You can choose comfort or truth, belonging or accuracy, feeling or thinking. The choice is yours. But understand this: civilization is not saved by governments or institutions. It is saved by individuals who choose intelligence over ignorance, one decision at a time. Now I want to hear from you. Write in the comments what patterns of intellectual decline you recognize in your own life or society. What are you willing to do differently? What standards are you willing to maintain even when others abandon them? If this conversation disturbed you, if something inside you recognized the pattern and felt called to resist it, subscribe to the channel. Here we don't provide comforting lies about everyone being equally intelligent. We offer uncomfortable truths about the choice between excellence and mediocrity, between thinking and feeling, between building civilization and watching it fall.